Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
More than 1 million homes in the UK use a wood-burning stove or real fire. Sales are booming, and we're not just talking rural folks here who may not have natural gas. We're talking city dwellers who perhaps want to feel a connection to a more rustic life. One might even say it's become something of an interior design fad. But diesel cars were a fad too, and stoves might just be getting that diesel stigma. On the day that Britain was among the EU countries to be reprimanded for breaking clean air rules, and on the day that London, in fact, hit its pollution limit for the whole year, at least on one measure, the government opened a consultation on the domestic burning of solid fuels. It worries that stoves are adding to local air pollution. The Mayor of London is also concerned. David Grossman has been looking at the data.
Really not that long ago, you could taste the air in our cities. You could cough up black globs of it. That is, if it didn't choke you to death.
If you looked at his X-ray, you would see plenty.
Tens of thousands did die. The days when massive structures like this belched out black smoke into our towns and cities are fortunately long gone. They were closed and the air quality improved. This one's now being turned into luxury flats. But the Environment Secretary has identified another threat to the air we breathe on a much smaller scale. People who burn wood in their stoves and fireplaces. This may come as something of a surprise to lots of people, and others sat in front of their fires this evening.
You might think burning wood and coal at home was a problem of the past, a problem of the 1950s and 60s, but it's something that's returned under the radar. If you go into WH Smith's and pull one of these home-style magazines off the shelves, you'll find pictures of people in their lounges with wood burners, and it's something that's crept back in the last 5 to 10 years. Over 1.2 million wood stoves have been sold in the UK, and now somewhere between 30 and 40% of the particle pollution in our cities is coming from wood burning at home.
A fire like this may look and feel great, but its impact may be much bigger than many realise. The permitted emissions of particulates for a wood-burning stove are actually 6 times greater than for an HGV lorry.
Tell me what this is.
It's a poster about air pollution.
Yeah.
The Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has talked about banning stoves. The government says it isn't planning to do that. Making an enemy of so many voters may not be politically prudent. But what else could they do?
Well, ultimately, what we need from the government is a new clean air plan which will bring down emissions to safe levels across a whole range of sources, so covering wood burning, covering cars. With regards to wood burning in particular, there are some simple things that we can do. So burning wet fuel, burning wet wood or wet coal is much more damaging than dry wood. So we can restrict the sales of wet wood to discourage people from doing it. And we need to do more to get the information and advice out there so people know that they shouldn't be burning wet wood and that they should always dry it out first to protect their family's health and their neighbours' health.
But it could be argued that the problem has been caused by too much green legislation rather than not enough. We were, after all, encouraged into diesel cars because they emitted less CO2, and wood burning became attractive partly because green levies made more conventional fuels more expensive.
I don't think we can blame taxpayers or consumers for these things. They're responding either to government incentives or even just government advice. People, by and large, tend to trust the government for good or ill on these areas. Really, the problem comes in when the government tells them one thing, incentivises it in one way, often using taxpayers' money, and then changes its mind when the evidence changes, which I suppose is good, but then ends up lumping taxpayers and consumers with the cost, and always with unintended consequences. It's always taxpayers and consumers who end up bearing the brunt of it.
The government has so far only launched a consultation, and since they say they won't be banning wood burning in hearths or stoves, their options seem limited, beyond perhaps educating us to use cleaner, drier fuel.
David Grossman here with me, a journalist and wood-burning stove owner, Harry Wallop, and the Green Party's Caroline Russell. Well, what's better about fire heat, Harry, than radiator heat?
Well, it's obvious, you know, the reason why man, or certainly, you know, Homo erectus, has been rubbing two sticks together for the last 600,000 years is because it is warming and it is comforting. And for any of us who live in a house that was built before the war, all our sitting rooms, the focus point is the fire and the hearth. And if you're an urban dweller like me, in these very uncertain times, a wood-burning stove is a little dash of rural comfort.
It's a fair chunk of trouble, though, to put the wood in, buy the wood, put the wood in, light the wood with the kindling. I mean, it's not like turning on a boiler, is it? Let's be honest. You even chop wood, I think, don't you?
I love chopping wood, but I don't actually burn it. I forage for wood in the mean streets of North London.
Your crisis of masculinity is expressing itself. But now you have an open fire, I think, Caroline, don't you?
I do have an open fire, but I don't use it. You know, Michael Gove wants nothing more than for us to be sitting here discussing how much Harry likes to drink his cocoa and put his slippers on and sit in front of the fire. Today we have had the main pollution breach in Brixton. I met parents down there who were telling me how worried they are about the impact of air pollution on their children's lungs.
Can we really believe these figures that are quoted, that fires are causing 40%? Because fires, I mean, look, a lot of people have them, but not that many people.
Fires are making a contribution. Fires do produce
40%
small particles of tiny particles which are so small when you breathe them in, they get into your lungs. Those are the particles that cause cancer, that cause cardiovascular problems, and really make people's lives miserable. If you're living with COPD, this particle pollution is makes your life a misery.
So they don't give out NOx and stuff like that, which diesels do. So of a very specific set of particles, they give out a quite large proportion.
Yes, and we have been living in, burning wood in London has been illegal since 1956 with the Clean Air Act. It has crept back in, and I don't think anyone is aware.
Greenhouse gas emissions, very, very low, though. I mean, you're talking about gas giving away 25% more carbon dioxide than...
Evan, we're talking about public health here. We're talking about particles that are actually causing lung problems, that are stunting children's lung growth, that are causing cancer. It's a public health situation. But the point is that the government has been avoiding doing what it's meant to be doing to clean up our air. They were meant to comply by 2010.
I want to bring Harry back in. You've heard the case against Harry. Now, what do you think? Because obviously this is a middle-class thing, right? I mean, a lot of people, no one in a tower block can have a big fire, a lovely wood-burning stove, because they can't have a wood-burning stove.
Yeah, well, first of all, my wood-burning stove is not illegal. Mine is cleared by DEFRA, and so though the figures are that particulate matter, 40% of it is caused by burning wood in the home, we think only a very, very small percentage of this comes from wood-burning stoves. Most are open fires, which are illegal if you're in a big city.
Which are much worse, aren't they? The fires,
But I've, in fact, spent the day with a thermometer which measures PM 2.5, which are these very dangerous particulate matter, and it is true that a wood-burning stove gives out more than often a busy street in London. So a wood-burning stove is 40 micrograms per whatever. Thank you very much. And a busy street can be less. But if you go down to the Tube in London, that is alarmingly high. It's 5 times higher than a wood-burning stove. So there are so many worse threats to our health than a wood-burning stove.
I mean, it is the nice smell when you go into a country village and people are burning the fire. That actually is the same as the particulates, I think, isn't it? When you smell that nice smell, oh, the lovely fiery smell.
You will still be breathing in particulates.
Do you think, Caroline, that the government should ban these, that effectively the kind of middle-class hobby of having these fires just makes it unbannable, even though the logic would be to say, just get rid of them?
What the government should be focusing on is the big picture of public health and transport. That's where their absolute focus should be. In terms of these wood fires, yes, they are absolutely a problem, and they need to deal with them. I mean, they need to make sure...
Ban them or not?
They need to make sure that anyone who has a wood-burning stove has one that is compliant. But even the compliant ones, the DEFRA-compliant ones, are more polluting than a diesel car. So, this is a health issue for the people who are enjoying the fires, as well as for the people who are breathing the smoke outside in the street.
Leave it there. Thanks both very much indeed.